specifically imported from Georgetown University for the Christmas break. He's my nephew, Justin Potisit, my sister's son. And he originally, of course, hails from Thailand, but you're not going to hear much of an accent. He's that good. Also, the other thing is he is the author of a book that he's written while in school. It is called the Silicon Leviathan, and he's going to talk some about this because it's a pretty interesting read, and it's something that talks about topics that are right in front of us all the time here in the news every day, all the time, and very relevant because what I'm hoping to talk to Justin here about tonight is a perspective that we don't get to hear all the time, which is what youth think about this, what folks in his generation are experiencing, how they're viewing things that are happening in the news. And we're going to cover a range of topics. So it's going to be really interesting tonight. And so I want to welcome Justin to the program. Justin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kevin, for inviting me on. I'm looking forward to discussing a range of topics with you. And usually we do these things off camera, but it's going to be nice to have a little bit of a conversation about what my generation thinks and what kind of thing have a younger perspective, and maybe that'll be valuable for your listeners as well.
Well, and we've been talking about these things for many years. I started propagandizing him with all kinds of classic books, and it's interesting because I think Hobbes' Leviathan was probably somewhere in the mix there.
Oh yeah, when I was 10 years old maybe, and I think I'd been to I'd got my first Kindle, and I asked Kevin here to set it up for me. And I remember one of the first the things that got me the thing that got me into politics, into my interest in government, was reading Locke's Two Treatises of Government, Hobbes, the Leviathan, and a few other of these.
Adam Smith,
yeah, and all these kind of classical thinkers that I think perhaps younger people aren't being exposed to nowadays.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because I think that was one of the main topics I wanted to lead off here with, which is, you're a grad student at Georgetown University. Describe the undergraduate degree that you did at Georgetown.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I also did undergraduate. I did my undergraduate at Georgetown as well, and it was I created my own major, which is because there were certain, I felt like the major requirements at Georgetown University did not meet my needs, and didn't really allow me to really explore the topics that I really want to explore, and take the classes that I want to take. And I feel like, there's that's definitely a big responsibility, but I'm a big believer in my academic freedom and my ability to create a curriculum for myself, and to really be a free thinker, as your hat.
Yeah, I wore that on purpose today. I'm next to a free thinker, but I also know that we have to remind folks that how important that is. And, it's very common, or it's become more common for people to do that now, which is to customize these degree programs and combine things that might encompass areas that didn't normally get associated with one another in the past. So yours was ethics, technology, and history.
Yeah, and politics as well. So we kind of, so it was a kind of an amalgamation of all three of these different areas with a research focus. So I think that's really what the future is going to be about, Kevin. The future is going to be about how we can take these different disciplines, and this is a lot of what we talk about in my grad program, which we can get to in a bit. But the ability to take a discipline and then challenge the foundations of that discipline from another discipline. And I was actually talking to a Georgetown professor who won a Nobel Prize back in the 1970s for his name is George Akerlof, and maybe the folks on this your captive audience here might recognize George Akerlof's name from his more famous wife, Janet Yellen.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's right. And I asked him, "Oh, sir, how did you win the the Nobel Prize? And he said, oh, I don't know. I think I got lucky. And then I pushed him a little. He's a little bit aging, but I pushed him a little bit more on the subject, and he said, well, back then they didn't really look at the numbers when it comes to economics, and now it's all about economics. But I think there might be a inflection point here where we're going back to more heterodox, not heterodox, more fuzzy, warm feeling kind of methods of running the economy, which I think a lot of us who have to be paying into the system for the next 50 years are concerned about.
Yeah, I always think about whenever they say, well, you know, we've got a $30 trillion deficit. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of know you're going to be paying a lot more than I am. But also, we're setting a precedent that may not be terribly sustainable into the future. Well, let's dig into some of these topics here. So academics, free speech, you know, one of the things that is a major topic now is has been described as woke culture, or the way conversations are they allowed to take place on a college campus like they once were? When you talk to people who've been around for a while, or professors, do they feel inhibited from really saying what they think, and sometimes maybe saying things that a lot of people disagree with? But then again, most of the great ideas didn't happen because they were popular. They happened because someone dared to explain it and justify it. What is it like trying to operate in today's campus environment?
I think that there are definitely places to be free thinking, and there are certainly professors that I've had personally who have encouraged me in that journey, which I'm quite thankful for. But if we're thinking about the the typical college experience, it's something that you really have to seek out. It's not given to you like on a silver platter, but it's really what Lori here in the comments is saying. You know, it's about a graceful method of listening and hearing others think. And I think that there are certainly places to do that on a college campus, but I think a lot of people are being woken up to the excuse my
they're
language.
awakening. Yes.
they're kind of rethinking this idea and thinking about how we can create better spaces for students to and larger places in which students can really engage in conversation and really live out the Chatham House rules.
And those are
so for those who don't know, the Chatham House rules were developed in England in the early 19th century, maybe early 20th century. And it's about, you're supposed to be open to all opinions that come through the door, and making sure that you don't use those words to crucify someone, or to kind of look down upon them because they have this one opinion. And even I think there are some people who are being looking at this and trying to and recognizing, hey, that we don't really have a lot of that we're pressuring students to think in a certain way, and that's counterproductive. A lot of people on the left as well, which I found very refreshing.
So there's more people that might be, say, perhaps left of the center divide that you're encountering that tend to agree with this idea that people should hear ideas they may not tend to agree with or like or even hate, but then they grapple with and debate them. I mean, I know that on the conservative side of the ledger, we tend to be confronted constantly with things that we don't like to hear, and we don't really get to. We're not running many of the institutions that shape our society, the entertainment, a lot of the media, certainly academic institutions. It can be pretty rare to find somebody where a conservative philosophy prevails. However, so we end up having to contend with these things. I've always thought that makes people at times on the left who don't want to confront things they don't agree with a little bit intellectually lazy if they don't know how to debate or argue against those things. And it was funny because I just read a quote from, I think it was Socrates the other day, and I can only paraphrase it, but it was something to the effect of like something about personal attacks are the province of those who find themselves defeated in a debate, and that kind of makes sense. We see a lot of it, don't we? But Chatham House rules, that's interesting. I know that there's a place that used to be, I think we visited this at your graduation, a room where there used to be these debates, right? And yet some folks wanted to see if they couldn't cancel the people that were represented on the walls. And some of those people are the founders of the country.
Yeah, no, there's a whole debate that we had over this past year about that room, and there used to be portraits on the walls, and there was an effort to redo the room in a way that was that the people who are leading the debating group felt like was more equitable and better for the general safety, the kind of emotional safety of the debating society. And I obviously disagree with what they're saying, but we have to kind of look at the root of why they're saying these things. And that's something that I'm still struggling with even to this day. And but I think like Lori says what she's saying in the chat, that like having these good communication skills to really go out and control your tone when you confront the other side who you may disagree with. I think that's a really good, important lesson that we can take away, and that's what I've been trying to learn. And I think that's in our kind of current political environment. I think that's something that maybe we can understand how we can kind of
improve upon.
Yeah,
sure. Well, and the issues that they wanted to bring up aren't illegitimate. They're ones that you because there's sort of a slaveholder past that is associated with the university. It was founded at a time when that was actually in Virginia, the law. It was fine under the law, but I also think that I've noticed more and more that maybe they go too far and they want to erase part of history, the very part of history that causes people to want to re-examine and confront things that may have been wrong in the past, which, there are many things that were done wrong in the past too. And everything should be fair game in a sense to discuss what happened. Otherwise, what use is history, right?
Yeah. And I think the kind of historical continuality, the continuation of these of a room and of our history is really important to understanding the way that we live today. Because if you forget history and you only look at the present, you can kind of draw your own conclusions. You're not really listening to other people and trying to understand what the perspective of other people are, not extending that grace and that understanding of where other people are coming from.
Well, history should lend itself to debate, not lend itself to canceling people.
Yeah. And like a kind of a discipline hardening, and like this one party rule of a discipline is toxic. And I think that people are recognizing that. And I think I think a lot of people, there are few places where you can have hope. I feel like we have hope.
If anything, maybe there should have been a debate around the time of the university's founding about slavery, which was probably very hard to establish. So now they're not going to necessarily fix it by canceling anybody who wants to debate anything else that they don't want to hear. It's an ever-present battle, but it's certainly intensified in recent years. Now, the issues of gender and race, and we just talked about slavery, but a modern conceptualization of what shapes our society seems on many college campuses. They're very, very focused on gender and race. And, there's principles that didn't always hold true in society around merit, that you would look for people to achieve, no matter what their background or identity was, the highest degree of accomplishment or refinement of an academic discipline. And is merit still something that people value, or has it been trumped by these other things in a college environment?
That's a good question, Kevin. And I think that the it's nuanced, and there are places that the effect is more, and the emphasis on these gender and race are more kind of emphasized in other places. And but what I found is that college campuses are really diverse, and gender and race are obviously important things to talk about. We shouldn't, just like history, we shouldn't we shouldn't get rid of them, but that's not to say that we should try to place undue emphasis on them and reject kind of the pursuit of truth and knowledge, and the conception of trying to get closer to this conception of the good that that all disciplines are trying to get at, right?
Well, in where I'm hailing from the state where the state Department of Education is promoting something called ethnomathematics, which is essentially math that can be wrong. And because if you tell people that they've gotten a math problem wrong, that could be racist. And we see, I think, some examples at times where they've obviously gone too far to the detriment of people that they claim to be helping, which, we're a nation of second chances, but we shouldn't be a nation of incorrect math problems. Or who wants a bridge designed by somebody who doesn't really feel obliged to get math right? I'm not riding across that bridge. So there's been a lot of good debates. I hope that they continue to happen on college campuses. Another thing is it seems to pervade almost every aspect of public policy now, and almost every discussion we have. It's like the ultimate aside from what happened during the years with COVID, and where that was obviously a big effect upon public discourse, really the one that seems to have taken center stage before and now is climate change. And there, it seems like a vigorous academic debate should be had, that many academicians have found themselves canceled because they might actually reach a conclusion using science and facts that are different from other academicians. But the academicians that get government grants are likely not to be the ones that disagree with assertions that are made about climate change and what its effect are. And now we're facing a global situation with energy, one that where it's almost the core driver of much of the inflation that we're experiencing. It's also causing some civilized countries to stare into the abyss of what it's like to not be a modern civilized country if deprived of affordable and abundant energy. And here in Oregon, we've got city councils such as Milwaukee just passed something. It's being debated in Eugene, and it may be also debated in Bend. And of course, it's only a matter of time before Portland tries to plan. They're trying to ban the use of natural gas in new homes and in commercial buildings, well before there's alternatives that are ready. What happens when people try to discuss this topic on a college campus, given that the ideas that are supposed to shape the future and create these innovations probably should have their origin on these campuses, but so should the ability of a modern society to function and for people to maintain livelihoods that are, that don't make them completely destitute.
I mean, I'm not a climate scientist, or
I'm not a biologist either.
I'm not a biologist either, but I don't quite understand the full extent to which I'm not involved in these conversations that often. But what I will say is that I think that there's a burden on the rest of the world, right? So I was at a talk with a oil exec and energy executive, and he mentioned he said that every time the power goes out in a developing country, I think he cited some country in South America. He says that 471 people, or 100 or so people, hundreds of people die.
Yeah.
And every time, and he was a ESG type of person. So he's talking about ESGs and whatnot. And he said that the trouble with that is that you want to push this energy sustainability message, and I wouldn't want to live next to a coal plant. I don't think anyone does. But the fact is that we have energy needs every time we're trying to move off of that. Every time the power goes out because of unreliable energy, we have an issue there, and people die. And the rest of the world, that every kilowatt of energy can improve people from across the world. I've been across the world, and so that's something that everyone has to who's interested in this climate change and energy topic really has to consider and think about.
Well, and economic sustainability is just as important. If it becomes so important, climate change and energy transformation becomes more important than people's lives, it's rapidly going to become unpopular. I think that's where people exaggerating or creating hysteria or claiming that climate change literally causes every ill known to humankind. They could go to the extent that they actually cause every ill known to humankind. Just ask people in Europe right now who thought they would have time to transition away from coal and natural gas, and suddenly they don't actually have it. Their economies are shutting down. This is something that you would hope would be studied and fully debated in a academic environment. But if it's not, then someone has to debate it, or reality sets in, right? You can freeze to death as easily as you can end up being in too warm an environment. And much of history, being cold was far worse than being warm, for sure. Well, Thailand, we were talking about when it was 15 degrees last week here. The weather in Thailand sounded pretty good just about any day of the week, right?
Yeah, but it's crazy that we were talking with family in Florida, and they're actually colder than we are here.
Yeah.
in
for a day or two.
For a day or two, but that's still crazy.
Well, so another topic that really has been in the news across the country, but I'm not so sure people on college campuses are as affected by it or as aware of it. But, then again, it's Washington, D.C., where you're located. We've got homelessness, crime, and what's been happening with law and order in the justice system. Here in Oregon, they like to talk about how they're reimagining criminal justice and public safety. What we have come to understand it to mean is to not have public safety and to reimagine criminal justice to the point where frankly, people see the victims as the criminals that commit crimes, and the actual victims of those crimes are just collateral damage. It seems like something you wouldn't see in a civilized country. It sounds more like the kind of thing that, and I know from people that have immigrated here, they saw in the countries they left. A sense of lawlessness, a sense of chaos, injustice. And then when you add on homelessness, a good portion of that homelessness, at least here in places like Portland, are associated with a societal breakdown that is even promoted, that is even enabled by changes in the law or by subsidizing people to come and live in a tent in the city rather than try to arrange affordable housing or something that accommodates their needs. What are you seeing? What are people talking about on a college campus and in a place like DC, which has seen issues with crime increasing? You probably come to some close encounters of it personally.
Well, there's 5 minutes from my place in DC. I saw the other day a homeless guy light up a bonfire in the middle of the street, and we just walked around it. No one said a thing. No one was freaking out or anything. But I think a lot of elites in DC they can't really ignore it. They see that there's this issue and people are trying to come to a solution to it. But maybe they're trying to do it with grace and with love. But sometimes there's a we they may not get to the right solution, and there might be issues with those, that the being too kind to the point that they're accepting of people who just they defecate or are screaming on the street. And I really don't know if that's something of a wider societal malaise, or is it a transitional thing where we'll have better mental health practices and a better mental health care for people in the future. And hopefully my generation, we're bombarded with all this information and these messages of desolation. I think that if we were to put out more hope in the world, I think that might be a better way to move to a society where mental health is improved, and we'll have less homeless people and more people or people who are taking better care of themselves.
Yeah, and I think we've also seen some of the ideas that shape places like Oregon be based on ideas whose origin was a college campus, but they weren't necessarily tried and proven successful in the real world. They experiment on Oregon in particular. One of the things that we had is a state measure that was put in front of voters, kind of deceptive. It was called Measure 110. It said what we're going to do is tax cannabis sales because cannabis is legal in Oregon, and we're going to use it to fund behavioral health treatment programs for drug addiction and for mental illness. That actually didn't happen as it was supposed to, because frankly, the people running the state are also very poor at executing things, because it's good. They'd rather say they're doing something. I think it's called virtue signaling is probably the best way to put it. Virtue signaling is not charity. It is the feeling of feeling good about yourself, but actually not accomplishing something meaningful. However, in small print, they decriminalized the first state in the country to do this. All of the hard drugs, the opioids that have been driving homelessness and creating death and mayhem in places. And then there was a rush of people here to our state to live here who actually just wanted to do crystal meth in a tent and not be hampered by a legal system, which disappeared with regard to that activity. What about ideas that are tried on college campuses? Do you think there's more of an obligation for them to prove that something works before becoming enamored with a wonderful idea and then just experimenting live on millions of people?
Well, they'll people on college, people who are looking at public policy, they're also often looking at the numbers, right? They're looking at, hey, this method has been tried in a small community in Denmark, and it's worked.
Well, Portugal, that was the other one.
Or Portugal, right? And we can import that here to America, and they say, oh, we saw 54% reduction, but a lot of that's you can make numbers say anything if you try hard enough, and so it's up to people who are looking for the truth to point out that you have to use your brain a little bit and to import something, a different public policy prescription, to kind of import that in and try it in a kind of unintelligent or in a manner that isn't looking at the context in which it's being implemented. I think that's doing a disservice, and I think that's really why I wrote my book, because I think that's all about the process of looking at just getting things done, doing the basic processes of government. And I think that's really where people can make the most impact, by improving these processes of procurement, of managing people who work for the government, and to do these things in a way that can be more efficient. And I that's why I wrote my book. It's really looking at the differences between digital natives such as myself, who grew up immersed in the world of technology and of these kind of digital innovations of the internet, and looking at how that contrasts with people who didn't grow up with using the internet, and seeing how how these two groups could work together to create a more modern and more efficient and more caring government, in a way that makes the government better in every way.
So it sounds like one of the words that should probably be
Caring
part of
government,
that.
I know that's
Maybe accountable government.
Accountable government is what I meant.
Because if you're using the tools of the digital age, then you should have a lot of data, and you should also have the ability to measure whether things work or not, right? And then to adjust to those things so they produce better outcomes. And I think that's what you were kind of getting at there, because now I'll just mention this again. So Justin's book, the Silicon Leviathan, how digital natives will transform governance. And it's interesting because there's people feel two different ways about technology, and it's like a tool, like anything else. Sometimes it does good, sometimes it does bad. We are having a vigorous debate now about the role of media, digital media, big tech companies, and what they are doing, and sometimes what they're doing to a society, not just doing for a society. And then a group that I want to ask you about here in a minute, that we are familiar with here in Portland, that has been very effective at using technology to literally organize political violence, and not something unheard of on college campuses for that matter either. But what do you? I think your book is about an optimistic view of what could be done, right? Which we don't often hear that. And how would you contrast that with some of the things that we're seeing and hearing that appear to be counterproductive, or at least as we learn more about what's being done with technology to almost control or manipulate society? How do you strike that balance between the two? How do you make sure that technology does the good thing and not as much of the thing that is counterproductive?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a way, Kevin. That's a good question, and I think that we that's one of the reasons why a lot of young people don't have a lot of hope. And I think that out of kind of desolation and the lack of hope, we see violence as being kind of the reaction of that. And I don't know if there was a time when people were full of hope, but maybe there was, after the Second World War, maybe we had a little bit more hope for the future, and that message of being that there's a your children will grow up to have a better future than you will.
Maybe optimism is
for optimism, right? Like there's a large swath of this country that they don't actually believe that and maybe some of our audience today, that they think that their children aren't going to be better off than they are in this economy, and that's something that might manifest with young people. They're kind of they don't have families, they don't have hope for the future, and they want to have their voices heard, and they turn to violence, which is tragic and abhorrent. And I do not condone that kind of behavior. And I think that's it's not within. I think that looking at these kind of more these underlying issues of, hey, like we have a lot of young people in this country who don't know what to do with themselves. I think that's what I've been talking about with my friends, at least. And I think that we should try to think of a kind of coherent political theory of what we're going to do with how we're going to integrate these people and
how we're going to respond to this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting to me. I mean, I'm not surprised that somebody might not be very optimistic about a country like the United States or the places, the system that they live in, if they've come up in a school system that's told them for years that it's a deeply flawed, in fact, a bad country. And I'm pretty sure you've encountered some people that are completely committed to that idea. And it's very hard to talk them out of things like violence because they figure, well, this is a terrible system. We have to overturn it or destroy it. To see this, you need to only go downtown Portland on a particular protest. And the signs you're seeing aren't saying, hey, we need to fight for racial justice. They're talk about we need to overthrow this effing system and replace it with something that actually has been proven repeatedly not to work everywhere in the world, such as Marxism. And there are many fans of that, unfortunately, on university campuses even today. But few examples other than its ability to lead to mass genocide in many countries in the world. What is the key to countering what people have come to believe about the country? Because I mean, other people say, well, you're Pollyannish when you start talking about the good things about a country like, say, the United States, because you're not thinking critically. You're not analyzing and finding its flaws so we can fix them. Even if some of them don't really want to fix them, they want to destroy the system that manifests flaws. I'm surprised, though, because when I talk to people from other countries, their own countries don't spend a lot of time telling them through their school system how bad their country is. Is this an American thing primarily, to actually, for it to be condoned or considered a positive, to tell people, well, you're deeply flawed and your country is terrible? It's funny because I asked your brother this question, and after watching a PragerU video about this, and I said, and it was a bunch of students being interviewed on a college campus, and it was, or it might have been campus reform, which I know they've interviewed even some friends of yours in Georgetown, and the students were saying one thing after another, which actually contradicted the facts, but they believed it. They believed the country was a bad country for X, Y, and Z reasons. And I said, how much of this is being taught to students in Thailand? And him and his buddy that were going to school in Thailand at the time said, no, they don't really do that.
well, I mean, America is the world's forum, right? Things that happen, in America, everyone around the world hears about it. And so I think there's maybe more of a spotlight on America as opposed to other countries. I mean, you look at Canada, a lot of people don't know that, they were probably even more horrible to their native people than, I mean, I don't mean to rank, in terms of horribleness, but the Canadians, a lot of people think that they're very, very nice people, and they're certainly nice people. But they, if you look under the hood, they've got their skeletons as well. But I think that they're not talked about as much because there's the spotlight's not there, and so I think we've kind of, America has put themselves up to this really high standard, and people who don't. Who want to see the American experiment fail. I think they
take advantage of that.
Take advantage of that. I think we should put ourselves to a higher standard, because I think that America has the ability to make that, to hit those those standards. But that's not to say we should just completely focus on that at the detriment of looking for a path forward.
So there are some people that exploit it, but it's the downside of it being a forum for any discussion that takes place.
Sure, I think our media takes advantage of this as well, because there's an old saying that I think you taught me, or maybe it was your dad. It was like a man bites, headline reads, man bites dog.
A dog bites man, not a headline.
Dog bites man is not a headline. Man bites dog is a headline.
Yeah.
So we, certainly there are people out east that don't believe Antifa exists. I mean, that they think it's a right-wing conspiracy to smear the left.
Well, the president of the United States said it himself. He actually told people it didn't exist. It's a concept. And a concept did millions of dollars of damage to downtown Portland.
Yeah, and we can, you can just drive down to downtown Portland. You see the burnt out houses and shops and whatnot,
boarded up places. Yeah,
no, so true. Like it's that's what I'm more concerned about. That we have a kind of centralized media technology, the internet. They're allowed. I like to say that they are a loudspeaker to both the good and the bad, and we're trying to figure out how to kind of curb the negative impacts of the concentration of power that happens on all these tech platforms. Yeah, and seeing how we can create
they tend towards monopolies in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And there's a lot of good content on both sides who are looking at the media and looking at how the monopolistic tendencies of some companies. If you want to look at Josh Hammer out at Newsweek, and Bobby Sewell, who's the person who runs, he's the editor of Reason Magazine, and they have very different perspectives on the whole thing. And if people are curious about this kind of thing, I think that's what a lot of people are thinking about. And I think that's the kind of most brave thing that you can do is to actually look into these things and really take a passion. I think that's maybe that's what a young person really. A lot of people are not. They're kind of apathetic to the whole thing. So if any of our audience here has young people in their lives, ask them what they worry about and what they if they're not only what they worry about, but what they're going to do about it. Because I think we can, we can sit on our phones and not really go out into the world.
Well, if you want to read about the pros and cons of antitrust implications of digital monopolies, maybe don't rely on digital monopolies to feed you the only information you receive about that topic. That might be the number one thing to start with.
Yeah, if you're getting all your news from Facebook, maybe you're doing it wrong.
But keep watching us here. Keep watching us on this show, because we're going to keep bringing interesting discussion that you probably can't find anywhere else in Oregon. I don't know where else this is happening in Oregon, but this is the only time I've seen somebody spending this much time talking about these things with folks of my nephew's generation. And speaking of that, this would be a good thing to kind of wrap up on, and then we want to do one more mention of your book. There's a debate about the Republican Party taking place. Of course, it's a debate that takes place publicly about the Republican Party. There's a debate on campuses where sometimes it's not even okay to be a Republican, but also a debate within the party right now about whether or not it's effective in doing the right thing. And it's all coming to a head with the debate that's going on about who should be elected as the next chair of the Republican National Committee. They're looking back at the election of 2022, what went right, what went wrong. And we all know it's foreshadowing for a big presidential race that's coming up through 2024. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, why don't you tell our viewers what the, who's running and where are the different parties?
So for the Republican National Committee, there are 168 people that represent 50 states and I think 7 or 8 territories. It's 3 people each, a national committee man, national committee woman, and a state chairman. And in the mid to end of January, I forget the exact date, they're going to be gathering and voting on whether the 2 candidates that I know of right now, or there's 3 candidates, and I'm forgetting the MyPillow guy's name, Mike Lindell. Then there's the incumbent who has been leading the RNC for 6 years, and that's Ronna McDaniel. She dropped the Romney part. I think we all know why. And then there's Harmeet Dillon, who's the national committee woman and First Amendment lawyer from California, who is making the case that the incumbent shouldn't be reelected and that we need to go in a different direction. And that's the debate. I know that it'd be interesting to hear what young people think about this, especially there aren't a lot of young people on the Republican National Committee. I can tell you that right now. That's a pretty rare thing.
Well, I think that's an issue, right, Kevin? I think that we should have more young people involved. in politics, and looking at
I'm not a young person in that context, by the way, even if I maintain some youthful vigor. Yeah. And I didn't shave today either, just like he didn't, but that's okay. It's been a holiday period. But yeah, you think that a youth representation in the RNC is lacking?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there are different, camps of the Republican Party that have fundamentally different ideas about, what the party should what the party's path forward should be. You have, a lot of these national conservatives who, are looking at, who are looking at, using leftist solutions for, traditional, to pursue traditional goals. And then you have kind of the fusionists and the libertarians part of the party who are looking more at, kind of saying the par for the course, and I think that it's a really complex issue that honestly it's too it's too complex for even like most people to understand, and there's lots of moving parts. But I think that there are young people who are flocking to both sides. There are a lot of people who don't like the ideologies on college campuses, don't like cancel culture, but who are not really willing to embrace the traditional values that a lot of people who are national conservatives who are looking more at looking to reform big government for big government purposes, and looking at but there are also people who are really like the traditional values of the national conservatives, who are very patriotic, who are tending towards the national conservatives, who are tired of a Republican Party, who establishment Republican Party, who they feel that doesn't really resonate with them. And so we're going to have like kind of this fight over the party is going to continue for many years.
Well, maybe this is a good opportunity, just by paying attention to this debate and providing the reaction and input, that younger folks can start to form an opinion about this and make their voices heard on this. Because actually, even though these folks are already elected and already maybe even have an opinion as to who should be leading the RNC, they are still obliged to listen to the input from all the people they represent, which includes people who are younger. And another aspect to this debate, I think, has been the role of a Washington, D.C. centric focus versus perhaps something that reflects input from outside of D.C. And I know that one of the candidates has probably been, everybody has this. It's like, you see this with people who are elected to office. In the first term, they represent their home district or state. The second term, they're kind of like straddling both. And by the third term, they're more representing the capital of whatever city or country they are spending their time in, back to the people that they're supposed to represent. And it seems like they identify more with the people they spend time with in that capital than they do the people that elected them in the first place. That happens a lot. I think that's the debate that's going on right now.
But I think that's been an issue for centuries, since the founding of our country.
It has, but then that's why. What is it? I mean, refreshing the tree of liberty seems to involve sometimes newer people or people with a different perspective coming in, and I know that is and I can see how younger people might be attracted to that idea.
Yeah, and you see how many people who are represented in Congress, right? You see most are baby boomers. The baby boomers have kind of left. I think there's something like 3 people who are. I think there was one person who was Gen Z in the last Congress, and now there are 3 people who are Gen Z who are 25, maybe 30, and just a couple of millennials.
One of them's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Yeah. I think she does probably represent a lot of college campuses, as it would be too, in her perspective.
Yeah, I mean, but it's up to democracy to decide that. You can have that's the beauty, right? You can elect someone who's great, or you can elect someone who's not so great, and but they're ultimately the key there. I think that's what our listeners should try to think about is that, you know, keeping those people accountable and making sure that they, even if they disagree with you, they're actually listening to you, and they're making sure that, you know, their voting record is going to reflect so going to benefit the people back home. And,
well,
yeah, go ahead.
I think that fits with mentioning one more time about your book, because I think that's something that is at play here. The Silicon Leviathan,
which you can get on Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
We'll post a link before we just after we wrap up here for anyone who wants to get a copy, or they can contact me. I actually have copies as well, and it's the kind of thing that, you know, using these digital tools to maybe introduce that accountability and citizen participation, of course, because isn't it supposed to, in many ways, technology, digital means of governance should allow citizens to participate more fully in how they're governed and having input on it, and not just as a control mechanism, which we see in some places in the world there. It's almost dystopian how they use technology to control the population.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that that's up to, you know, Americans to figure out, you know, how we're going to use technology in government and do it in a responsible way. And, you know, there are certainly examples out there, but like I said earlier in this program, you can't just take, for example, Estonia has this great digital government scheme. I'm sure that Kevin will post that on the, you know, after the show is over. But the important part is, you know, not to copy and paste these public policy regimes, because that just won't work. That's lazy, and that's something that you know isn't, or is doomed for disaster. And we've seen that across the country time and time again. And that's really why, you know, discussion of these topics is really what the most important. That's the key thing, right? You keep people accountable via discussion and via kind of an open dialogue about, you know, we have different assumptions about this topic, but we're going to listen to one another and think about how we can challenge our assumptions, and to really freely think about the way these policies impact our lives, and keeping that's really important to keep your representatives accountable, and to really make them explain, to force them to explain why they voted for each bill, for each important bill.
Yeah, we actually promote events that are going on in the state all the time, whether it be an input period on a new set of administrative rules, of which I believe there are too many sometimes, and not enough debates within a legislative body about whether there should even be such administrative rules. But they make these administrative rules, they have comment periods, and then no one comments. Or like we had this city council meeting in Eugene, Oregon about banning natural gas. 200 people showed up and let them have it with what they really thought. And that may or may not have the effect, but it also may have the galvanizing effect of affecting what happens in the future. Candidates get recalled. Candidates run for these positions and win offices. There's all kinds of things that are generated if people become engaged. So I just posted the link to Justin's book, and I hope everyone that's interested takes a look at that. This has been a great show. I really appreciate you taking the time here, really on almost no notice whatsoever. It's just a continuation of the discussions we often have, but also it's good, and probably a lot of our viewers are not your age, but they haven't really had this kind of a conversation with someone who could articulate what's happening not only on a college campus, but from the perspective of somebody that's looking at the world maybe through this digital native eyes going forward. And we'll have to have you back again to talk about international. We got a whole page of topics we didn't get to, and we'll get to another time. And of course, there's always things happening in politics, an ongoing presidential race, and many things that we'll have a chance to talk about in the future, which we can do from anywhere. Yeah. You just happen to be here today. So thanks again for joining me here, Justin.
Can we actually answer some user questions?
Yeah, we can take a couple of minutes to do that.
Yeah, I'll answer Lori's question here. How can we reach his generation for approaching them on voting? That's a good question, Lori. And I think that the value, that's a good question, and there's not a really straightforward answer, because I think a lot of money is spent on advertising and on trying to cater to young people via things like TikTok and Instagram, and not so much Facebook. That's our generation considers that an old person thing already.
Yeah.
But the thing I would encourage our listeners to think about is, what's the kind of core value proposition that you're gonna give to young people, right? Like, a lot of people are looking at these structures that they were raised in there, and they reject them. They don't see the value in them, and I think that previous generations have found the value in that, and I think it's about communicating that those values that you believe in a productive manner, in a manner that has grace and care and love, and saying, hey, this is going to be good for you in the long run. That, these values that I grew up with, they're important, not because they just are, but because they'll bring you, they'll have happiness. They'll give you happiness. They'll give you fulfillment. They'll have you be a better person. And I think that's something that I think we should, if you're trying to reach our generation, that's something you ought to think about.
Well, and that ties in well with, I think, the fact that a lot of people are gathering with family over the holidays, and sometimes people either take confrontational approaches to discussions, and then they don't go anywhere, or they lecture younger folks, or they just avoid it altogether, which is, I think, just as big a mistake, to absolutely not share the wisdom and the insights that you have. But as you said, do it in a way that you kind of get their permission, or at least you get the opportunity for them to open up to the idea, rather than telling them, let me tell you this, son, and it's like immediately people close up to that. Now, it's interesting. Lori had another question here. What if we were taught history incorrectly? And I think she's probably referring to the fact that some people actually don't know history, or they've been, I talked to somebody probably from your generation about the Cold War, and they know absolutely zero of one of the most consequential phases in recent history, and they know nothing at all. They don't even really realize when Ronald Reagan was president, or what Harry Truman did after World War II, or what the Cuban Missile Crisis was. And I always
don't forget the Gipper, right?
That's right. And of course, what was the Soviet Union? A lot of people are only now discovering that there's this country called Russia, and actually it used to be the Soviet Union. How do you repair the damage of people not knowing history? How do you get them interested in it?
Well, as someone who studied history in college, and who continues to read history, that's something that's been bothering me. And I think that history can be taught to us as a series of facts, and when really it's a discipline that is much deeper than that, and it's much more about politics, sociology, the way things are, can give you glimpses into the future, right? And so and that's where we do a disservice to young people when we're just saying, okay, like, you need to know when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That's
1492,
right? That's not interesting to young people, and we have so much information coming at us that really you have to make a better case then.
What about the play Hamilton? Net positive?
It's getting kids interested. I don't know I haven't actually watched it, so I don't know the historical accuracy or whatever of it. But if it gets people interested, hopefully they can be taught. They can think about history in a they can get interested in history, and then learn from learn history in a way that isn't biased towards one side, and they're trying to really look at use different lenses to view history, not only the ones that are mainstream. And
one of my favorite movies. I don't know if you've watched it yet.
1776.
1776, the musical, which got the kids singing songs and getting interested in something, and then they knew all the historical context of the era.
There's not a great one for I wish there was a 1776 for the Cold War. But
well, it's funny you mentioned that, because one of my favorite movies is called Spinning Boris, and
we watched that.
And it seems like it's a fictional movie, except other than a few times when movies have to take a little dramatic license to fill gaps that they don't have every little single factual detail. Actually, it seems like a fictional drama, and it's a factual drama. And to me, that actually opens people's eyes. It has some famous actors in it. There was one other question I saw in here, and let me scroll down to that, because so Carla asked, what happened to beggars can't be choosers? Is there a reason for that? Maybe I'm trying to remember the context of what that might be in, but
I think it was when we were talking about the homeless issue. What happened?
But there's also a discussion about energy before that. I guess I don't know exactly the context of it, but I do think that there are at times people wondering why we are so tolerant of some things, of what at times seems like the intolerable. That it's charity to allow a person to decide if they want to live in the street in squalor and do opioids, that's tolerant, or that it's tolerant,
or caring
for that matter. Yeah. Right. And also cashless bail is another one. It's like, well, we're being very caring about somebody who's committing a crime because they can't afford bail. In New York State,
in Illinois, they just voted on it.
Yep. And it skyrocketed crime. But then we have to have a debate about it, right? We can't just say, well, that worked, let's keep doing it, and then it fails completely. Maybe it's just part of the ongoing discourse about the topic.
Yeah, and but the most important part is when these things don't go well, that those people, the people who implemented those policies are held accountable for what they did.
Shown the door, maybe.
Yeah, shown the door, or they say, hey, this really didn't work, and they adopt a different approach, and they actually listen to their constituents, which I think is much easier now to do it via digital technology and social media. But it's also really easy to get lost in the
shuffle, to forget and to get distracted from things. And then all of a sudden one day they're telling you that you have to electrify your house and it'll only cost $15,000 out of your own pocket. There you go. You should have spoken up sooner, right?
Well, I know most people in my generation don't believe they can actually own a house, which is kind of adding to the social malaise that we see, I think.
Yep. Nope. That's exactly it. And so we need to reverse this and then introduce some. I always like to think GOP for Republican Party stands for Grand Optimistic Party. And if we can actually speak in those terms, sometimes maybe we'll recapture a lot of interest, especially from younger people who probably crave some optimism in their lives. Well, I know that was me adding a little commentary at the end, but again, I think we got a lot of these questions answered, and we really appreciate everybody taking the time to watch. It was a special show tonight, and it was great having you on, Justin. And we'll have you again, and we'll talk about some stuff, economy, international stuff, things that you have a special perspective on from around the world that most people here don't even pay attention to. And then, of course, we'll come back and revisit the news and all the issues that come up, especially as the election progresses. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Okay, everyone, please share this show with everyone you can. We know that you want people to see this show, and all you have to do is click share and find 10 people that you think might actually bother to watch because you're sharing with them something they can't find anywhere else. Thanks again for watching The Captive Audience. We'll be back tomorrow night. I don't know who the guest is going to be yet, but hey, every day is a surprise, and we always give you something pretty good to watch. Have a good one, and we hope everyone had a very Merry Christmas holiday and enjoy whatever time off you've got.